in human history wasn't his rebellion, but the truth about his divine bloodline. Today, we're diving into the most controversial revelation that could shatter the foundations of religious understanding. The Hebrew word Helel in Isaiah 14:12 doesn't just mean morning star, it reveals something far more shocking about Lucifer's true identity. Prepare yourself for a journey that will challenge everything you believe about good, evil, the divine hierarchy itself. The name Lucifer itself carries a mystery that most have never understood. In the original Hebrew text, Helel ben Shachar translates to Shining One, Son of Dawn, but here's what they don't want you to know. The Latin term Lucifer, meaning light bearer, was first applied to Jesus Christ in the Vulgate Bible's translation. Think about that for a moment. The same title given to the supposed enemy of God was originally used to describe the Son of God himself. This isn't coincidence. This is revelation. Ancient texts from the Nag Hammadi library and early Christian writings suggest something that mainstream Christianity has buried for centuries. Lucifer wasn't just another angel. He was the firstborn of divine creation, bearing the actual DNA of divinity itself. When Genesis speaks of God creating beings in our image, the Hebrew Elohim is plural. This suggests a divine council, a family structure that extends beyond our limited understanding. Archaeological evidence from sites like Tel Megiddo, where Canaanite DNA has been preserved for thousands of years, proves that bloodlines carry more than just genetic information. They carry spiritual inheritance. The confrontational truth is this: in a world where identity politics divide us along racial lines, we're missing the real battle. It's not black versus white. It's divine bloodline versus corrupted humanity. Every person, regardless of skin color, carries within them the potential for both light and darkness. The Hebrew concept of tzedek teaches us that justice isn't about punishment. It's about restoration and alignment. Lucifer's story isn't just about one being's fall. It's about the choice every human faces between serving divine purpose and serving selfish ambition. Tell us in the comments, have you ever felt like you were fighting a battle bigger than yourself? The book of Ezekiel provides us with another piece of this puzzle that most pastors won't touch. Ezekiel 28:2:19 describes a being of perfect beauty and wisdom, walking in Eden, covered with precious stones, and serving as a guardian cherub on God's holy mountain. This wasn't just any angel. This was a being with access to the very throne room of the Almighty. The Hebrew text describes this figure as having been perfect in your ways from the day you were created, till iniquity was found in you. But here's where it gets interesting. The word created in Hebrew is bara, the same word used for God's creation of the heavens and the earth. This suggests that Lucifer wasn't made like other angels. He was specially formed, crafted with divine intention and purpose. Some ancient Jewish texts, including certain midrashic traditions, suggest that Lucifer was created as God's right hand, his firstborn son in the spiritual realm, designed to be the bridge between divine and created order. Modern DNA research has shown us that bloodlines carry information across generations that we're only beginning to understand. Scientists have discovered that trauma, wisdom, and even spiritual experiences can be passed down through genetic memory. If this is true for humans, imagine what it means for beings created directly by the divine hand. Lucifer didn't just rebel against God, he rebelled against his own divine nature, his own spiritual DNA. This is where the story becomes personal for every one of us. Whether you're sitting in a church pew in Alabama or a community center in Detroit, whether your ancestors came from Africa or Europe, you're part of this same spiritual bloodline. The confrontational reality is that we've been taught to see ourselves as separate, as different, as enemies, but the truth is, we're all children of the same divine source, all carrying the same potential for both light and darkness. Share this revelation with someone who needs to hear it today. The rebellion itself tells us everything we need to know about the nature of free will in divine justice. Isaiah 14:3 records Lucifer's 5 I will statements. I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the Mount of Assembly. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. Notice the progression. This wasn't a sudden decision. This was a calculated plan to usurp divine authority. But here's what most people miss. Lucifer already had access to heaven. He already had a throne. He already had authority over other spiritual beings. What he wanted wasn't power. What he wanted was recognition as an equal to God himself. The Hebrew word Elion, meaning Most High, suggests not just authority, but the source of all authority. Lucifer wanted to be acknowledged not as God's son, but as God's equal. This desire for recognition, for equality, for acknowledgement of worth, this is something every human being understands. In our current political climate, we see this same struggle playing out. Communities that have been marginalized demanding recognition. Individuals fighting for their voices to be heard. The difference is, Lucifer had legitimate claim to divine heritage. His rebellion wasn't born from oppression. It was born from pride. The spiritual awakening happening across America today, documented in recent psychological studies, shows that people from all backgrounds are experiencing what researchers call transcendent shifts in perception. These aren't just emotional experiences. These are genuine encounters with spiritual reality that transcend cultural and racial boundaries. When someone truly encounters the divine, the first thing that happens is they realize that all human divisions are artificial constructs, designed to keep us from recognizing our shared spiritual heritage. What spiritual awakening have you experienced that changed your perspective? The fall itself is described in Revelation 12:3-7-9 as a war in heaven with Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon and his angels. But this wasn't just a battle between good and evil. This was a family conflict that tore apart the very fabric of spiritual reality. The Greek word polemos used here suggests not just war, but civil war, conflict within the same household. Imagine the pain in the heart of the father, watching his firstborn son choose rebellion over relationship. Imagine the anguish of Michael, fighting against his own brother. This wasn't a victory celebration in heaven. This was a funeral. The casting down of Lucifer wasn't just judgment. It was the most painful decision a father could make, choosing the greater good over his own child. This is where the story intersects with every family that's ever been torn apart by pride, by politics, by different visions of what's right. In black families across America, we see fathers and sons divided over how to respond to injustice. In white families, we see generations split over how to address historical wrongs. The Lucifer story isn't ancient history. It's playing out in living rooms and dinner tables across the nation right now. The Hebrew concept of shalom teaches us that true peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of wholeness. Lucifer's rebellion didn't just affect him, It shattered the wholeness of creation itself. Every injustice we see today, every division, every conflict, traces back to that original breaking of divine unity. But here's the hope. The same divine DNA that was in Lucifer is in every human being. The same potential for rebellion exists alongside the same potential for redemption. The choice is ours. How are you choosing to use your divine inheritance today? The aftermath of Lucifer's fall created what theologians call the cosmic conflict. But what we're really talking about is the ongoing battle for human souls. When Lucifer was cast to earth, he didn't lose his divine nature, he corrupted it. The being who was designed to be the light bearer became the father of lies. The one who was meant to bridge heaven and earth became the one who creates division and chaos. Look at our world today. Look at the way social media algorithms are designed to create conflict and division. Look at the way political systems pit communities against each other. Look at the way economic structures create artificial scarcity while abundance exists. These aren't accidents. These are the strategies of a being who understands divine principles and uses them for destructive purposes. But here's what Lucifer didn't count on. Every time he creates division, he also creates the opportunity for unity. Every time he sows hatred, he creates the possibility for love to shine brighter. The civil rights movement wasn't just about political change. It was about spiritual awakening. People of all colors coming together and saying, "We refuse to let artificial divisions define us." The DNA evidence from archaeological sites across the Middle East proves that the peoples of the Bible were far more diverse than most people realize. The Canaanites, the Israelites, the Egyptians, they were all part of the same human family, all carrying the same divine spark. The conflicts described in Scripture weren't racial, they were spiritual. The question wasn't what you looked like, the question was whose authority you recognized today. We face the same choice. Do we recognize the authority of division, of hatred, of systems designed to keep us separated? Or do we recognize the authority of the divine unity that connects every human soul? Tell someone today that they carry divine DNA, regardless of their background. The prophecies about Lucifer's ultimate fate reveal something stunning about divine justice. Revelation speaks of a final battle, but it also speaks of a final restoration. The Hebrew prophets spoke of a day when all things would be made new, when even the most broken relationships would be healed. Some early Christian theologians, including Origen, believed that even Lucifer himself might ultimately be redeemed. This isn't universalism. This is the recognition that divine love is more powerful than divine wrath. The same God who cast Lucifer out of heaven is the same God who sent Jesus to earth to reconcile all things. The cross wasn't just about human sin. It was about healing the cosmic breach that began with Lucifer's rebellion. Think about the most broken relationship in your life. Think about the person who has hurt you the most, who has betrayed your trust, who has chosen their own pride over your relationship. Now imagine the possibility of complete restoration, complete healing, complete reconciliation. That's what divine justice looks like, not punishment for its own sake, but restoration of what was always meant to be. The spiritual awakening happening across racial lines in America today is a preview of this ultimate restoration. When a white police officer and a black community leader come together in prayer, when a Hispanic family and an Asian family share resources during a crisis, when Native American wisdom guides urban renewal projects. We're seeing glimpses of divine unity that Lucifer's rebellion tried to destroy. The confrontational truth is this: every time we choose unity over division, every time we choose love over hatred, every time we choose restoration over revenge, we're participating in the cosmic healing that began at Calvary and will culminate in the New Jerusalem. What relationship in your life needs divine restoration? The hidden records speak of Lucifer's divine lineage in ways that challenge everything we've been taught about spiritual hierarchy. The Gnostic texts, while not canonical, preserve traditions that suggest Lucifer was not just the first created being, but the first expression of divine creativity itself. The Apocryphon of John describes a being of pure light who became corrupted not through rebellion, but through the desire to create independently of divine. Well, this distinction is crucial. Lucifer's sin wasn't disobedience, it was independence. He wanted to create, to build, to establish order according to his own vision, rather than submitting to the divine plan. In many ways, this makes him the first entrepreneur, the first innovator, the first being to say, "I can do this better." Modern archaeology has uncovered evidence of advanced civilizations that seem to have appeared suddenly, with sophisticated knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering that defies conventional timelines. Some researchers suggest these represent the influence of spiritual beings who possessed divine knowledge, but used it outside of divine authority. The parallel to our current technological revolution is striking. We have the power to create artificial intelligence, to manipulate genetic codes, to alter the very fabric of reality. The question isn't whether we can do these things. The question is whether we should, and under whose authority we operate when we do. The Hebrew word Nephilim in Genesis 6 describes the offspring of divine beings and human women. These weren't just giants. They were beings who carried both divine and human DNA, who possessed capabilities that transcended normal human limitations. Some traditions suggest that Lucifer's influence on human development wasn't just spiritual, but genetic, creating bloodlines that carried both extraordinary potential and extraordinary corruption. This isn't about racial superiority. This is about spiritual inheritance. Every human being, regardless of ethnic background, carries the potential for both divine creativity and destructive independence. The choice isn't determined by bloodline. It's determined by submission to divine authority. Share this truth with someone who's struggling with their identity and purpose. The true legacy of Lucifer isn't found in horror movies or heavy metal music. It's found in every human being who has ever looked at the world and said, "I can make this better." The question isn't whether that impulse is good or evil. The question is whether it's submitted to divine wisdom or driven by independent pride. Look at the great movements for social justice throughout history. The abolition of slavery, the civil rights movement, the fight for women's suffrage, the struggle for workers' rights. Each of these began with someone recognizing that the current system was unjust and deciding to work for change. The difference between divine justice and Luciferian pride isn't the desire for change, it's the willingness to submit that desire to divine timing and divine methods. Martin Luther King Jr. understood this distinction. His vision for racial equality was revolutionary, but his methods were submitted to divine principles of nonviolence and love for enemies. Malcolm X's evolution toward the end of his life showed the same progression, moving from independent anger toward divine submission. Both men carried the divine spark that demands justice, but they learned to channel it through divine wisdom. The Hebrew prophets consistently called for justice, but they defined justice as mishpat, which means restoration and healing, not just punishment. True justice doesn't just tear down corrupt systems, it builds better ones. It doesn't just expose wrong, it establishes right. It doesn't just divide the righteous from the wicked. It provides a path for the wicked to become righteous. This is where Lucifer's legacy becomes both warning and promise. The same divine creativity that led to his fall is available to every human being. The same desire for justice that motivated his rebellion can be channeled into divine restoration. The choice is ours. What injustice in your community needs divine creativity to address? The confrontational reality is that most religious institutions have failed to teach the full truth about spiritual warfare because they're afraid of the implications. If Lucifer really was God's son, if he really did carry divine DNA, if his rebellion really was motivated by legitimate concerns about justice and creativity, then the battle between good and evil isn't as simple as we've been taught. The Word of God is described as sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing to the division of soul and spirit. This means it cuts both ways. It reveals not just our sin, but our divine potential. It exposes not just our rebellion, but our legitimate hunger for justice. It shows us not just what we've done wrong, but what we're capable of doing right. Every person sitting in a church pew, every person walking the streets, every person struggling with addiction or depression or anger carries within them the same divine spark that was in Lucifer. The difference isn't the presence or absence of that spark. The difference is what we do with it. The spiritual awakening documented by researchers shows that people from all backgrounds are experiencing encounters with divine reality that transcend traditional religious categories. These aren't just emotional experiences. These are genuine revelations of spiritual truth that challenge existing power structures and call people to higher purposes. But here's the warning. Every spiritual awakening can become spiritual pride. Every encounter with divine truth can become the foundation for independent rebellion. The same experience that leads one person to humble service can lead another person to arrogant self-promotion. The difference isn't the experience itself. The difference is the response. Lucifer's story is ultimately about the choice between service and self-promotion, between divine submission and independent pride, between using our gifts to build God's kingdom and using them to build our own empires. How are you using your spiritual gifts to serve others rather than promote yourself? The DNA of divinity isn't just metaphorical. Recent scientific research has shown that spiritual experiences actually change our genetic expression, activating dormant potentials and creating new neural pathways that enhance our capacity for love, creativity, and moral reasoning. When someone has a genuine encounter with divine reality, they don't just think differently. They become different at the cellular level. This explains why true conversion experiences are so dramatic and so lasting. It's not just a change of mind, it's a change of nature. The same divine power that created Lucifer as a being of light is available to transform every human being into a reflection of divine character. But transformation requires submission, requires the willingness to let divine authority reshape our desires, our ambitions, our very identity. This is where most people struggle, regardless of their background. We want the power of transformation, but we want to control the process. We want divine blessing, but we want to maintain human autonomy. The archaeological evidence from biblical sites consistently confirms that the stories we read in Scripture took place in real history, involving real people who faced real choices. These weren't mythological figures. They were human beings like us, carrying the same divine potential, facing the same fundamental choice between submission and rebellion. The 53 biblical figures confirmed by archaeological evidence represent just a fraction of the real people who chose to align their lives with divine purpose, rather than human ambition. Each of them faced the same temptation that Lucifer faced. Each of them had the opportunity to use their gifts for self-promotion. Each of them chose service instead. This is the path forward for our divided nation and our broken world, not the elimination of human ambition, but the submission of human ambition to divine purpose, not the suppression of creativity and innovation, but the channeling of creativity and innovation toward divine goals. What divine purpose is calling for your unique gifts and abilities? The final revelation about Lucifer's divine bloodline isn't just about ancient history. It's about present reality and future hope. Every human being who has ever lived carries within them the same divine DNA that was in Lucifer, the same potential for light, the same capacity for creativity, the same hunger for justice and beauty and truth. The difference between salvation and damnation, between light and darkness, between divine service and rebellious pride, isn't determined by bloodline or background or circumstances. It's determined by choice. The choice to submit our divine inheritance to divine authority, or to use it for independent purposes. This is why the gospel is truly good news for people of every race, every culture, every background. It's not about becoming something we're not. It's about becoming what we were always meant to be. It's not about suppressing our divine nature. It's about expressing it through divine channels. The unity that God desires isn't uniformity. It's harmony. Different voices singing the same song. Different instruments playing the same symphony. Different gifts serving the same purpose. The diversity we see in human culture isn't a problem to be solved. It's a reflection of divine creativity to be celebrated. Lucifer's rebellion created division, where God intended unity. His fall scattered what God meant to gather his pride, separated what God designed to connect. But the same divine power that created him in the first place is still available to restore what was broken, to heal what was wounded, to reconcile what was separated. The confrontational truth is this: the battle for America's soul, the struggle for racial justice, the fight against economic inequality, the war against spiritual darkness. These aren't separate conflicts. They're all part of the same cosmic restoration that began when Jesus said, "It is finished," and will culminate when every knee bows and every tongue confesses that divine love is the ultimate authority in the universe. Every time we choose unity over division, every time we choose love over hatred, every time we choose service over self-promotion, we're participating in the healing of the cosmic wound that Lucifer's rebellion created. We're not just changing our communities, we're changing the spiritual atmosphere of the entire planet. The Hebrew word tikkun olam means repairing the world. This isn't just a Jewish concept. This is the calling of every human being who recognizes their divine inheritance and chooses to use it for divine purposes. Whether you're black or white, rich or poor, Educated or unschooled, you have a role to play in this cosmic restoration. Lucifer's story teaches us that divine gifts without divine submission lead to destruction. But it also teaches us that divine gifts with divine submission can transform not just individuals, but entire civilizations. The choice is ours. The power is available. The time is now. What will you do with your divine inheritance? How will you use your gifts to heal rather than harm, to unite rather than divide, to build rather than destroy? The answer to that question doesn't just determine your personal destiny. It helps determine the destiny of everyone whose life you touch. Share this message with someone who needs to remember their divine inheritance. The story of Lucifer isn't just about one being's fall.